Dear church, let's talk about shepherds. Hello and welcome to the Dear Church podcast. I'm your host, Chris McCurley, joined by one of my fellow shepherds. Again, this week, for the third week in a row, I've got one of my shepherds from Walnut Street on here to talk about being a good shepherd. And Mark Holland is definitely a good shepherd. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I've never been on a podcast, so we'll see how it goes.
I don't know that Mark knew what a podcast was.
I probably didn't know.
I want to say to our audience, when I asked you to come on, you were very uncomfortable because this is not your forte. You are a behind-the-scenes kind of guy, and you are a hard worker. And your response to me was, I'm not a real educated guy. I just work. And I thought, what a humble thing. But you're going to do fantastic. And so everybody watching and listening, I want you to comment and tell Mark how great a job you did, because I know it's going to be awesome. And behind every good man is a good woman. And I know your wife, Jennifer, has a lot to do with
she sure does.
Encouraging you and making you who you are today. And I am blessed to serve alongside you and the other 13 guys here at Walnut Street. It's been such a joy and a privilege to be here with you guys for the last 6 months, and look forward to many, many more years to come.
Me too.
And thank you for coming on, because I know this is not your comfort zone. So thank you for being here. Talk a little bit, Mark, about you, your family, and kind of what went into your decision to accept the offer to be an elder here.
Well, as you said, my name's Mark Holland. My wife is Jennifer. We've been married about 36 years. We have one daughter, Katie. She's married, and they live on base at Fort Campbell right now. And he is currently deployed, so overseas. So.
Okay.
I've lived in Dixon all my life, basically the same spot, and I love Dixon.
Yeah. Am I right in you live in the same house you grew up in?
Well, no, my brother lives in the same. He remodeled that house. I live within sight of that house.
Okay, so you're the same plot of land.
Yeah, same spot of land.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that, right?
That's
so, talk a little bit about when the elders came to you and said, "Hey, we want to make you an elder. We want you to be a part of this team." What was your first thought?
Honestly, to give a little history, I've served as an elder at a nearby congregation at Pomona, and the first thought was, do I want to do it again?
Do I want to jump back in?
Yeah, do I want to jump back in? I talked to Jen a lot about it, and we prayed about it, thought about it, talked to other elders here, and came to that decision to accept that. But I think that I started thinking about being an elder when I was very young.
Yeah.
I don't know, it just came across my mind when I was probably in my early 20s. Yeah. Would it be something I'd ever want to do? And so I don't think it ever, if you get the opportunity, you probably have thought it out before. If somebody gives you that opportunity, you probably have thought about what it would be like to. And I knew that we have a very good eldership here, and I was, after talking with Jen and talking with some other people that I'm very close to, I decided to jump back in, I guess. Yeah.
What do you think prepared you for the eldership?
I've been around men all of my life that I've seen do this work, mm-hmm. and watched them do it, and saw that it was both rewarding and difficult. Of course, you don't hear about everything that they go through if you're not in the eldership, but right. I've been around people all my life, and I think looking at the Word, a lot of prayer, knowing as best you can what you know that you should be doing as an elder, the kind of person you need to be, the kind of way you interact with people. Yeah. I think that is things that prepared me I don't think you've ever really prepared, but you do the best you
You
can.
study successes, I guess.
Yeah, you look at where, people that you think's done it right.
And a good culture prepares you as well. Right. We have a really good culture.
We do.
You look at the elders that came before the current ones we have now, and it's just a long line of good men that have served, and you plug and play, right? You add somebody else, and they just kind of keep the ball rolling. Hopefully.
And I knew most of these guys before. I went to school with a lot of them.
Growing up in Dixon.
I knew of them if I didn't know them real well, but one of our elders, Galen Brown, was my youth minister whenever I was in high school.
Know that. I'm learning new information.
He was my youth minister at Vermont.
Okay. So talk a little bit about functionality. I think this is something our viewers and listeners would like to know about, is when the eldership gets together. So there's 14 of you here at Walnut Street. You get together every second and fourth Sunday, I believe it is, and you get together that afternoon on a Sunday. Talk about functionality. How is it that you guys come to make the decisions that you make, to get on the same page, to make sure that the church is functioning the way that it should with you guys' oversight?
We usually when something comes up, someone will bring something that they've thought about a while, or maybe even a couple of elders have talked it over and they bring it to the whole group. You might have someone that a member or someone that says, "Hey, would y'all consider this?" And I think that's usually the way that things get to us.
Yeah.
Now you have scriptural things that you have to decide, that you want to make sure you stay with the Word, and then you have things that you decide to do that could go either way.
Right.
So someone will bring them up, and we'll start discussion. And I like that because we have a lot of discussion on this, unless it's something that is that's not not that hard to make a decision on.
Some things are cut.
We've had some that's really quick. Everybody, yay or whatever you're supposed to say, yay or nay. Yeah, and but some things take a while to hash out. Some things, I think, an eldership, when they're making decisions like that, you may decide to do something, but I believe that it's good to look down the road and see, hey, even though this is something that we want to do, there might be some repercussions, that you need to at least try to see what they might be, and be prepared for it if those things go.
So our eldership, and I'm interested to know how other elderships, function, so you guys can give us feedback on that. But our guys, you get together, you all have a place around the table. Right. You have discussion about the agenda item, because it's usually an item that's been on the agenda, right. And if it's an action item, then it's voted on.
Right.
So there is a motion, a second, and you go around the room and you vote yay or nay, and all those in favor say aye, all those opposed. Talk about how you guys maintain unity, because I've been in these meetings long enough, and enough of them, to see that there's not always a unanimous yay. Sometimes there is some opposition. So how do you guys maintain unity, and talk about the importance of that those who may be opposed to something that, ended up getting voted through, you walk out of that room and you present a unified front to the congregation,
Well, like I said, most things are pretty unanimous, but there have been times that there was people that elders that didn't agree with what we were talking about, or maybe I was one of them. but you got to have trust in these other guys. If you're in the minority and it gets voted in, you've got to have trust that, and really have the heart to try to make it work, whatever you've decided. I mean, you can't quit on it or anything like that, but you've got to have that trust in your fellow elders that this is the right decision. Sometimes we let things sit a little while, like I said, but then we make a decision, and you need to always. I believe in a unified front. You're gonna sometimes you will get questions from members and everything on what was made, what decision that was made, and you need to keep that unity. One should never say, "Hey, I don't like it, but this is the way it is." You shouldn't say that. That's not going to serve any good.
And that never happens. I've never seen that. I know that you guys always set aside me for the sake of team, and I appreciate that. And I've never heard once, "Well, wasn't my vote." That's something they did. I was against it. I have noticed there's been a couple of times in meetings where it was an issue that somebody in the eldership spoke up and said, "This is not one that we can walk out of here disjointed with, with a majority vote." I've seen that a couple of times where he said, "This is an issue we've all got to be on the same page," because just the nature of the decision was one where, we just really need to be unanimous on this. But that doesn't happen very often. But there's some decisions are grave enough that they need to be there, and I appreciate that as well. Successful teams, whether you're talking about an eldership or a basketball team, whatever, they have a tight bond, right? Talk about what an eldership can do to strengthen that bond. You guys obviously have a tight bond. It's one of the selling points when I came up here to interview that I walked away from thinking this is a group I could work with, because y'all had as much fun as any eldership I'd ever seen, joking around, laughing, having a good time. In fact, it was almost like you could see there were points where somebody was like having to reel it all back in and let's get serious for a minute. And I love that. So you obviously like to be together and enjoy one another. How does that happen? Is that just something natural, or what goes into that?
I can't speak for everybody, but and I am one of the ones that have to be reeled back in. Sometimes when I get to talking, sometimes I'm kind of quiet, but then other times when I start talking, it's time to get it back together. But for me, building that bond, I mean, you sit in there and you hear about each other's lives. You know that none of our lives are perfect. That we always that all of us struggle in ways, and it's just and just hearing those people feeling strong enough to discuss those kind of things with their friends and their fellow elders, shepherds, that builds a bond in and of itself, that somebody trusts me enough to talk to me. And I think that does, and for me, I like to talk to elders one-on-one just about anything, and I think that those one-on-one conversations that I've had with so many elders have helped me build unity with the whole group, because I've only been here at this congregation about 6 years or so. So, like I said, I knew everybody most of the part, but talking one-on-one with each other about nothing sometimes, or maybe something pretty deep sometimes.
Being together outside of the church setting too, which I know y'all do. I think that's important. It's very obvious that you guys like to be together, and I think you said it a while ago, the friendship aspect. You're all friends, and I think that goes a long way as far as being a tight bond. You are one that I see doing something all the time. You're constantly working. You're teaching Bible class, but at fellowship meals, you're always setting up, taking down. You and Chris Hedge, one of our staff members here, are constantly doing something. Your love language is work, right? You like to work, and you obviously enjoy working and serving and doing things like that. It reminded me, watching you this last fellowship activity when you were setting up and everything, there was this study that a youth minister did. And he told his youth group, he said, "I want you to name all 12 of our elders." A particular church had 12 elders. And he said, I want you all to write down the names of our 12 elders. And his social experiment was, he didn't think the youth group could name their 12 elders. And he was going to use that as a springboard to talk about how you need to get to know your elders and how he needed to introduce the elders to them. And so he took up the responses, and none of them got it right. None of them had all 12 elders' names. They had a few here and there. But every member of the youth group had one name the same. And the name of that man was not an elder. He was the janitor at the church, but they all assumed he was an elder. And I think that says something in that, our young people, these young people especially, were watching, and they thought, well, he must be an elder because he's mopping the floor and he's doing all the things that, in their mind, that's what an elder should be doing. I see you doing those things. Talk about the setting the example, not asking the congregation to do something you're not willing to do. And by the way, you're not the only one. All of our elders are very much like that. But you stick out to me with that. Talk about what goes into that. I mean, you are a worker, but is there a conscious effort in your mind to say, you know what, I need to be out in front showing people what we expect them to do, and not just sitting back? And, I've always said, there's a difference in an elder and or a shepherd and a herdsman. A herdsman stands behind the cattle and whips them and gets them to move, and a shepherd gets out in front and leads, right? So talk a little bit about that. Is that something that you think about, or is it just you dig into it?
Once again, I got to go back a little ways, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
I was raised in a church at Pomona where we pretty well never hired anything out. We just did the work.
Yeah.
And so that's why I started. And by the way, I was over the fellowship ministry there for like 27 years. So that's where that came from. And
a lot of work.
But I was always around good men, as I said before. And one particular elder stuck out to me. His name was Clyde Clifton, and he would be out on when I was a young man. You're talking about the youth group. You see things when you are young, and it sticks with you. And they would be out, and him and some other men in the congregation, they'd be showing the film strips to be able to trying to lead people to Christ and doing the work of an elder that I saw that would normally fit into a work, what an elder would do as you think about it. But then I would be around the building and I would see him. He would be using his talents. He was a plumber, and he would be doing those things. Sometimes it'd be with a group of men. Sometimes it would be by himself. And those kind of things just stuck with me. And I guess that's why I got to where I just grabbed hold of stuff and did that and enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of ways that you shepherd people.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think that, you're going to be there for them and helping them in the spiritual ways that an elder does. But sometimes I think all of us know that sometimes that shepherding people means trying to set good examples like that. I've worked side by side with these elders in the last 6 years that I've seen them. We've got together working on the mission houses, Habitat for Humanity, the Daily Good Project. I've got a picture on my phone that I wanted to mention of Ted Williams with a chicken in his hand unloading Chad's truck.
Yeah, Ted Williams. That's a great picture.
Yeah, I hope never to lose that picture. Chris Hedge took the picture and passed it along to me. But I think there's good to that. I know that there's a lot of different ways that you can help people understand what it is to do. And that I probably do it just because I like doing it, but I realize it serves another purpose as well, I think.
Absolutely. I think it's easy to have this, and we've done it to ourselves, right? But this vision of an elder being really good at business. He's really good at in business world, made a lot of money because he made a lot of good decisions, and therefore what works in the business world just naturally transfers over into being the board of directors at a church, right? Which we refer to as an eldership, but we tend to operate sometimes like a board of directors, and maybe sometimes that's necessary, but it tends to just kind of be our natural thought process. If they're well known in the community and they've made a lot of money because they're really successful, then they're going to make good elders. And that's not always the case by any means. A lot of times what makes somebody good in business is because it's my way or the highway, and of course that doesn't transfer over into the eldership. But it can be a good thing. But it also there's also a lot of men who did really what we might consider menial tasks, who may not have made it to the top rung of the corporate ladder, but have worked hard and are blue collar and just make, just do their best by working by the sweat of their brow as well, and hard labor and those kind of things. Not to say that someone who is a board president or anything like that hadn't worked hard either, but it's, I think we tend to just have this depiction in our mind of what, an elder should be. And he's just somebody who wears a suit and tie at work all day and makes decisions from above. And that's what's going to make him successful. And that's not always the case. And we have found that here, and I found that at many places. And I'm grateful that, we've got a working eldership. I think that's key. Anybody can sit behind a closed door and make decisions and expect everybody else to enact it. But getting out in front and leading the way our guys do is really encouraging. And with that, talk about the necessity to let deacons be deacons, let the staff do their job, and elders do their job, so that, the old saying doesn't hold true, that the elders are doing the deacons' work and, the deacons don't know what they're supposed to be doing. Talk a little bit about that, because I feel like that is probably the hardest thing to do, especially if you were a deacon.
It is.
If you were a deacon and you become an elder, I think it's hard.
It is hard to let go, especially if it was the kind of where there's actual physical labor.
Yeah.
It's hard to let go of that. And I'm not saying that any of us should completely let go of doing work, physical labor, but we have to develop let other people develop. I agree. We have to let them, create their own work, under the supervision of the elders. But there are, the church, we're not going to be around forever. And I mean, the church needs to have these people develop into what they should. And I believe they took the job to do the job. Mm-hmm. And I think all of us should be available to help, because people, they need help. We get so much help in the fellowship ministry, and that's another thing. I believe as an elder, I've gotten to know so many people by now Chris bringing them in to help us, and just by working side by side with people, putting everything out on the table, or you just get to know people that you wouldn't have got to know, that being part of this ministry, I did. Yeah. But I will say this, I want to put that out there. That Chris and I have discussed, he's going to soon be full-time as our coordinating minister, Chris Hedge.
Our new staff member.
Right. Yes. And we've talked about sometime next year trying to transition to, of course, we'd always be available to help. But we would like to transition away from that. If there's anybody at Walnut Street that would like a job that would be challenging but rewarding, you get to know a lot of people, hey, it's going to be available. It's available now if you want to talk to us. Yeah. So that's our plug. Actually, Chris told me to give it a plug for that. So I did my job. So yeah, that's. I think you need to be aware of that and not, try to assert yourself as an elder into a deacon's work when he's trying to do his work.
It's kind of like when my son was smaller, I wanted him to learn how to mow the yard and do all those kind of things that I learned doing growing up. And, when he first starts out, it would be a lot easier if I just did it.
Yeah.
And it would look a lot better if I just did it. But how's he going to learn? I've got to empower him and encourage him and not just, take over. And I'm sure that's difficult for elders as well. There's a fine line between, I can just do it myself and get it done, or I can employ other people because they need a job and they need to learn the value of service and all that kind of stuff. Because I think, all too often, we hire a preacher and he does all the things that other people in the congregation should do,
right?
But we get this mentality of, well, why do I need to do that? So we hired a preacher, and you look at the job descriptions on Brotherhood websites when they're looking for a preacher, and, they're this long, and you read through all the duties that are expected of them, and you go, so what's your elders doing? What's your deacons doing? Because it looks like he's doing everything, right? And so I'm sure that's probably different. You guys do a great job of I don't want to say staying out of the way, because that's not the way to put it, but, as a staff, we never feel micromanaged. We never feel like, somebody's driving by and checking on us and things like that. And I think our deacons would say the same thing, right? I mean, I think they would. There's a difference in supervision and micromanaging, and right. I don't think that you guys get into the micromanaging business, but
I don't believe so either.
I can imagine it would be hard to, when you come from especially a deacon role to an elder role, just stepping back and saying, that's not my baby anymore.
Right.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who was you when you were 20 and was thinking about someday being an elder? And what would you say to that person? Hey, I'm glad you're thinking about this, but here's some advice. What advice would you give that person?
Pray a lot. Yeah. Pray years before it happens.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be every day, but think about it. Choose a mate that you think would have the same, if you're not married, when you start thinking about it.
Yeah.
If you are, hopefully, because, your wife is so important to the work.
Sure.
You spend a lot of time. And I think you need to understand that being an elder takes a lot of time. There's meetings, there's things that you have to do, and they're rewarding, and sometimes they're tough. But I would say that talk to elders. You can talk to elders if you're 20 or if you're 30, or you can talk to them and say, you're not going to tell anything specific, but you're going to say, hey, you're going to tell them what it's like.
Yeah.
And I would say that just know what the Word says. I've been told before that 95% of what an elder is told to do, a regular member is also told to do.
Yeah.
And I would agree with that. There's not a whole. We're all supposed to have that kind of life for the most part. But just think about getting prepared. We get prepared for a lot of other things in our life that may be years down the road. You start saving for retirement. You start doing a lot of things. If you want to serve in this role that someday, if you think you do, then start thinking about it earlier. And I was thinking maybe learn to be able to realize, hey, you're not going to always do it as good as you would like to do it. There's going to be times when you're going to say, man, I could have done better there. I expect more out of myself. I know others would. And just be able to get past that and regroup and say, I'm going to serve God as best I can, even though I think I failed here or something like that.
Yeah.
Be prepared to do
Being
that.
Able to recognize
recognize that you are not going to do it right. And if somebody points it out, be humble and be able to handle that.
I think that's key. That's great to be able to recognize when you don't live up to the standard.
Yes.
Because we're human beings, right?
Right.
All of us. I know as the preacher, I think sometimes it's expected that you're above the fray. No, I'm a preacher, but I'm also a Christian. I'm a church member. I'm like, everybody else in that respect. And so, I think that's key, is being genuine and honest. So you're a natural at this. You did a great job. Thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate that. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. I want to say, if you have a question specifically for Mark, you can email me at chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com. We'll make sure that Mark gets it. I'm sure he'd be glad to answer it. And if you have any other comments or questions, direct them the same email, chris.mccurley@rippleoflight.com, and I'll be glad to answer them. We just appreciate you so much for tuning in. Mark, appreciate you so much for being on.
Thank you.
And until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you. Sincerely, Chris.